Hello everyone, welcome to the Milk Sommelier episode 1. My name is Alessandro and I'm a sommelier here in New York City, working a couple Michelin restaurants as one. And today I thought it would be interesting to take a look at the different types of milk that you can find in your everyday grocery store. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Tuscan brand, which is a much more mass market variety that you can find in almost any grocery store here in the New York City area. The other is the Zeal Creamery, which is a more upmarket version that prides itself on being grass-fed. However, some interesting caveats about whether it is organic or not that we'll talk about a little bit later on. The reason I want to talk about this is because obviously, wine made of grape juice and milk made of milk, both produce in their own way, mainly water with the addition of some sugar, some amino acids, some protein. And so I thought it'd be interesting to talk about milk because obviously the market stratification is a little bit smaller than you would find with wine. I also think most people on average are using milk more often and drinking milk more often than wine. At least I hope so. But today we wanted to take a look at these and see, is this really the Charles Shaw and the Chateau Lafite of milk? We're going to find out. A little bit about the Tuscan here is that it's actually coming from here in New York State. They point out 2 family-owned farms on their website, although they don't really detail the areas where the cows are being kept, the type of food that they're enjoying. This notably is, of course, not certified organic given the price. $1.50 for this pint here, and then about $3 for the half gallon that's comparable to the size of the Zeal here. What I did find was interesting is between these 2 milks, the Tuscan is 150 calories for the serving of 1 cup, whereas the Zeal Creamery is 230 and about 1 more gram of protein. 8 grams here, 9 grams for the Zeal. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I think we're going to get into why that is in just a moment. Funny thing about the Tuscan here is apparently when they first started selling their milk on Amazon, subject to a lot of amateur milk reviewers back in 2006. And obviously the times have changed quite a bit in the last 20 years or so, and let's see if it still holds up. So we're going to give it a try, and let's go ahead and get right in. I have my very fancy broken tasting glass here, but still structurally sound. Now, something that I often notice with mass market grocery store milks, and I don't know if this is an artifact of how they are pasteurized or how they're transported to and from the stores that they're sold in, but they often have this sort of off smell, aroma, and flavor that is present even from when you first open them, that I think results in them being kept in an improper temperature for at least part of their journey. I notice this happens sometimes when maybe you leave the milk out on the counter accidentally for a day, and it might not be bad per se, it might not be spoiling, but it has this really off smell that I just find kind of not very pleasant. And I think it makes it more so of a milk that can be used for cooking, but maybe not for things where milk is sort of the star of the show. Cereal, chocolate milk, warm milk, whatever your milk needs may be, where it's really going to be present in a big way. And you can kind of immediately get that smell here, unfortunately. It's the smell of when you have been using a milk jug for a little while, you get those flakes of milk on the mouth of the jug, and it's not bad per se, but it just has that smell of kind of just stale milk. Really not very pleasant, especially for the fact that, you are paying good money for this. This did just come from a grocery store. You'd really hope they would have a little bit more freshness. And it's especially interesting considering that we have a milk coming from hopefully only 400 miles away at the most, and then a milk here from Zeal that's going to be coming from Missouri, so we'll see if it suffers from the same problem. And unfortunately, it does carry over to the palate. The flavor is a bit cloyingly sweet, kind of almost like the lactose milks, where the lactose has essentially been broken down into galactose and sucrose, which is why people with a lactose allergy can drink it, because basically it's already been digested for them. But they're really overly sweet, and I kind of get a hint at that at the beginning here. And then it goes into kind of this sour note that is also kind of unpleasant as well. So unfortunately, not a really great milk, and it kind of saddens me because this is the milk that most people are going to be getting and buying and using and drinking, and you would hope that it would be a little bit better if it's going to be the one that most people are going to be having. I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad by any means, but I definitely don't think it's the most pleasant thing to drink. So maybe in that way it is kind of the Charles Shaw of the milk world. I've had Cabernet Sauvignon from Charles Shaw that I actually thought was better than many of the very, very expensive California Cabernet Sauvignons that people drink at restaurants, but that's neither here nor there. So I'm going to take a quick break, going to rinse out this glass so that we get a full and equal treatment of both of these milks. I'll be right back. All right, so we've got a nice clean glass, and we're going to be going into the Zeal now. So a couple interesting things about the Zeal. One, as I mentioned before, going to be coming from Missouri. So very clear location, geographic origin for this one in particular. They are primarily using Jersey cows, which ironic considering this company is headquartered in New Jersey, but probably these are old Jersey cows, if I had to guess. Now, something that was interesting about the Zeal, I hinted at it before when I talked about their caloric differences, is that their milk is non-standardized. And what this means is for this Tuscan milk, let's say that they are, pasteurizing it and they test it and they find the milk fat is at, 4% rather than 3.5%. They might actually remove 0.5% of that milk fat to get it to a more standardized, consistent product. Whereas with the Zeal, they're just going to leave it as is, which I thought was interesting because in wine, oftentimes you'll find with smaller winemakers, you'll get a lot of bottle variation where you might have 2 bottles of the same cuvee, same grape, same area, same vintage, but one bottle will taste a little different or even a lot different than another, even if they're open back to back. So maybe that's something that will also result here if I was tasting it side by side with maybe another Zeal in a couple weeks or so. So they are using an ultra pasteurization process, which does mean that this is somewhat limited in terms of some of the culinary uses you can make with it. I think that does mean that you might not be able to make yogurt with it and things like that, if that's your bag. For me though, I just want it to taste good. Now, I also said that the organic nature of this milk is in question, unlike its counterparts that you might see on grocery store shelves, Organic Valley, Horizon Organics. You're not going to see organic on this carton at all because it is not certified organic. Now, they didn't detail exactly why that is. They mentioned that their cows have non-GMO grain when they are not, being pastured, when they're not going to be eating grass. But there's a couple different reasons why they might not be certified organic. I took a look at the USDA guidelines. It may be that the land the cows are grazing on was treated with pesticide at some point over the last 3 years. It may be that they're using plastic pellets so that the cows have something in their stomachs that they can actually digest that grass. I doubt it's that one, but I think that's part of the problem when you're not being specific about why they're lacking that organic certification. But I think we'll see if it results in anything different. They make a big showing about these cows having A2 protein on their website. They don't really talk about why that matters, but, in case you wanted A2 protein in your milk, I guess the Zeal is going to be one for you to look out for. So, let's go ahead and give it a try. I did have this with my coffee earlier, but I have not yet tasted it on its own. I will say I do think that the color looks a lot more pleasant. It's more of a yellowish, but like a yellowish of when you get like a really high quality butter. You can just tell that there's a lot more milk fat in here. And it smells like proper milk, it doesn't have that kind of off smell that this one had. We'll see if that appears on the palate. It does interest me why a milk coming from half the country away is able to maintain the integrity of itself, in terms of flavor and smell, better than one that's coming from the same state. I wonder if either the plastic is a poorer insulator than the paper, or if just the way they're being transported is different, or maybe this one is not necessarily ultra pasteurized, and maybe that's resulting in a slightly more, inconsistent product. So a huge difference on the palate, honestly. As I mentioned, this one was kind of cloyingly sweet at the beginning and then kind of went into being a little more sour. This one's much more measured. It feels just much more, composed for milk, that is. And it does actually have a finish to it where it sort of starts off with this kind of like bright, kind of weedy, grassy, I would say more wheat though, like more like a dried wheat, dried grass, hay kind of flavor to it. And that just kind of mellows out towards the end. The texture is also really nice. You can tell that there's a lot more milk fat in this one. And I think that really is why the caloric difference is a lot higher with the seal. A lot more milk fat, but why that's not leading to there being slightly higher protein than just 1 gram more a serving, I'm not really sure. It's very nice. It's a really great milk, Now, is it as good as those really nice ones that you can get in the glass bottles? I guess we'll have to see in a future episode. But I think for right now, considering our ranking of 2 milks, the Zeal is going to be the winner for today. And hopefully, if you're able to find it at your local grocery store, you can give it a try yourself. So thank you very much for joining me on this first episode of the Milk Sommelier. Leave your thoughts in the comments on any more information you'd like to hear about the milks that I'm going to be testing. And if there's any particular ones that you'd like me to try, I will keep a lookout for them in grocery stores, or if they're available on the internet and can be shipped in a temperature-controlled way, I will be sure to check that out as well. Thank you very much for joining me. Cheers.